time for back to school, but this time of year, children and youth often experience anxiety. So for more on signs to be aware of in your children and how to help, we bring in Tanya De Silva, child, youth, and family therapist. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, why do children and youth experience anxiety around this time of year specifically?
So I find for a lot of kids, they're going from a summer that they typically are doing a whole lot of nothing or a whole lot of fun activities like camp and going to the cottage. And now we're moving them back into an increase in expectations, new requirements, their schedules, their routines are getting filled with potentially a lot of things that they might not want to do. But we're also seeing that increase in pressure and anxiety and struggles with going back into social situations, going back into academic work. And one that we hear a lot of that sometimes is overlooked is they're worried about who is my teacher going to be, what is their teaching style going to be, and what's my classroom dynamic going to be like, and am I actually going to be happy with this for the next school year? So those are some pretty regular ones that we see.
Absolutely. New is always exciting, but new can definitely make you anxious. Let's talk about how the pandemic has heightened these feelings.
This is an interesting one too, because it really depends on kind of where kids are at in terms of if they were in school or not in school. But there's a lot of those traditional yearly ones that we just talked about, but now there's the additional COVID worries. So are we actually going to stay in school full time, or is it going to be a back and forth dance? Am I going to be exposed? Am I going to have to isolate? What are the restrictions going to be? So all of those are new things. And the interesting part here is for kids who have been out of school for a year and a half, they have this additional anxiety about academics and social. Some of them haven't seen their friends or talked to their friends for a year and a half. So they don't even know, like, are we still going to be friends when I return? And the academic pressure is a big one too. A lot of them will admit I was gaming or I was doing something else instead of paying attention on online school. So now thinking about, oh, I'm going to be called out in class is something that's causing a lot of anxiety for them. So this is a little different than the typical back to school.
Well, let's talk about maybe what to look for in children. What are some signs?
So we typically break it up just to make it easier. We talk about social, emotional, and behavioral signs. So for some of our kids, we might see these social struggles where they're very attached. So there's that separation anxiety from their parents, or they're very attached to one child in their classroom or one teacher. We might see that shyness or that isolation where they're not talking to anyone or playing with anyone or engaging in class. If we're looking at emotional, we typically see either meltdowns or panic attacks. We also hear it in the way that they speak. So that catastrophic thinking, everything's going to go horribly wrong. Or we see a change in their confidence where they're not confident enough that they're going to connect or do well. And behavioral, sometimes it looks a little different and it's overlooked because we're seeing regression in sleeping and eating and independence, or we're seeing aggression and we're not connecting it to anxiety. So for some kids, that anxiety can manifest as tears, but for other kids, it can be super frustrating and it's coming out as aggression. And sometimes it's overlooked because it's seen as a behavioral issue instead of an anxiety issue.
Okay, well, let's talk about some effective ways now to address this and to manage your kids' anxiety.
What we've been doing lately, and this is something we encourage starting before school starts, is we actually create a worry period and box as well as a problem solving period and box. So those can actually be the same box if you want to use it. But what we do is we get kids to either draw it out, write it out, or just put a reminder like a sticky note, and it helps them actually externalize their worries. So ones that they're currently having or they feel like they're going to have when school picks back up. Same with problems they're currently having or that they think they're going to face when school picks back up. And then we actually have a time, like a designated time, once to twice a week. Some families do it more often, but we go through those submissions and we start planning for how are we going to face this? What is actually difficult about this? And we move from just the worry and anxiety about it, and we look at what's the underlying skill or ability that they need to be able to take this on. So if a child is like, I'm worried that I'm not going to know how to communicate with my friends, we'll start actually building their communication skills instead.
Ways to get through it. Well, sadly, I have to end the conversation there. There's lots of tips for sure. You can head to behaviormatters.ca. I want to thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks so much.